Right, it's just past 6 o'clock, so I think we'll make a start. A warm welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us this evening for information on the Vacant Commercial Units Fund grant scheme, which is operating in Trowbridge. My name's Rory Bone, and I'm the Economic Development Service Manager at Wiltshire Council. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be available later on in the week online. If you wish to see closed captions of our speakers' words, then please click on the CC button on the bottom right of the screen, and they should then appear after 30 seconds or so. The system does sometimes take a little while to get warmed up, so please be patient. If you have any technical issues, then they're usually solved by closing down the meeting link and then rejoining. You're welcome to submit a question to be answered using the Q&A section, so please leave your name. We'll try to provide written replies in the Q&A section, and our presenters will also verbally answer as many as they're able to here and now. We have a couple of pre-submitted questions as well, which we'll run through before we go to the live submitted questions, and we'll get through those, certainly get through those ones today. I'll now hand you over to Councillor Richard Cluer, Leader of Wiltshire Council, who'll get us underway.
Thank you, Rory. So I just wanted to give a quick overview of the position we're in before handing over to the presentation. We've been allocated funding from government as part of the Future High Streets Fund bid, and this breaks down into a number of areas for Trowbridge. The main one in terms of spend being refurbishment of the town hall and trying to bring that back in as a sort of heart of the town for nightlife events, for music in the town centre. There are also improvements to the around the river, improvements around moving around on the high street. Some of the pavements are very narrow. Certainly when my kids were young and I had them up at meetings at County Hall, it wasn't the easiest place to walk around with young children when they were fed up and it was a lunch break from a council meeting. We've also then got this scheme around bringing vacant units back into use. I won't go through the details. It's 1.2 million in total. I'll let my officers run through the actual details. But the aim here is to try and promote some new local businesses back onto the high street, not necessarily traditional businesses, but anything that will help make the high streets come alive. The high streets of the future in Wiltshire are not going to be places simply about retail, or anywhere in the pretty much the country for that matter. They need to be a combination of places that are attractive, where people want to spend time, where they've got things to do, to attend events, to go out for a meal, to meet friends, to listen to music, and also to do some shopping and whatever else sort of goes with that vibe. They are going to be much less specific and much more inclusive areas, and again an eclectic and perhaps quirkier mix of shop units with different things in will support that. So that's the background for the programme and what we're doing. If I now hand over to Julian Head, who's Strategic Economic Programmes Manager, and he'll talk about the details of the Vacant Commercial Units Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's really helpful. As an opener, my name's Julian Head. As Richard said, I am the Strategic Economic Programmes Manager, overseeing much of this scheme, and I'm going to talk about the scheme and how to make a strong application. Hopefully, by the end of this part of the session, you should be a lot more informed about how to make an application and what we're looking for in terms of a good deliverable project. What I will insist that you do, if at all possible, is to look at the applicant's guidance. That sits on the website, the Wiltshire Council website, where we also have the application forms. And in that guidance, there's a lot of information that I will be talking about, and more information than I will be able to provide right now. And you probably should have a look at that as and when you come to put an application in, or before you put an application, so that you're well prepared to do that. And then hopefully we'll have good, strong applications and we're able to make some grants and really help the town of Trowbridge. So the purpose of the scheme, as Richard was sort of talking about, was really about the retail sector is shrinking within the town centre, and it's going to be continually vulnerable to consumer preferences for online and out of town shopping. We can see that. We can see that here. We can see that in other places. So there is what we call a market failure, and that comes out really from retailers, private sector, people who have had properties in the town centre not really wanting to invest in their properties, because after one property goes empty, another property goes empty, footfall starts to decline, and the market sort of place that the town centre has started to drop away. So what we're looking to do is to pump some public support into the town centre alongside private capitals, is where you come in. And that should together lead to a better trading environment for local businesses, and a better sense of place, so people are attracted to come into the town centre and to create that vibrant place that we're looking for, and to take a sense of place and a pride in the town centre. So our objectives with this scheme are to reinvigorate the centre by investing, and the investment are capital investments into properties and premises, to refurbish those premises and to bring them back to life where they're vacant, and in doing so diversifying the offer, and also using space, particularly upstairs and in upper floors of commercial properties, for residential properties, so that we also bring people back into the town centre and have a larger town centre population, which will also increase the footfall and the vibrancy of the town. So this is a £1.2 million part of a more strategic package for Trowbridge, which includes, as Richard said, the town hall, the improvements around the gateways, the streets, the pavements, the built environment, and also along the River Biss. So the next slide, please. So our priorities for the funding are essentially two areas. We're looking to support the refurbishment of the vacant commercial units, essentially along the street, the high streets and the town centre streets and the frontages, where we are looking to go into, or we're looking to help support investment into those properties to refurbish them, and they become business entities again. New businesses go in, shops, other services are able to revitalise the town centre along the front. And then upstairs, as such, we're looking to also help support commercial properties be repurposed towards residential accommodation in the town centre. Now, you look at the town centre, you think 10 years ago, would you have encouraged residential accommodation where there was previously commercial properties? Well, I think we've passed that stage now, where we are hoping that all properties would be commercial. We are looking for a much more mixed approach, and that actually a lot more sustainable and a long-term prospect for the town centre to have that sort of mix. And it's not just simply about refurbishing buildings and bringing them back to life. We are looking for a proposal that also shows us that you are going to strengthen and diversify the current offer within the town centre. So, reducing the number of vacant units obviously is the primary part of the investment, but creating more footfall, a vibrant street centre. If there are jobs to be created, we'd like to know about that. We want to make the town centre more sustainable and put more homes in there. So whatever you propose, you will need to also think about how you're going to work towards the priorities that we've got for our funding. Next slide, please. So this is the key part, I think, really, for the initial heads up that we're trying to do today. Are you and your property and your premises you have in mind, hopefully, going to be qualify for support? We've seen the priorities, and these are some of the more sort of hard technical parts of the application that you'll need to sort of qualify. So you need to be a private investor, and that means any type of business, and we can look at unregistered businesses, self-employed people. We know that landlords and developers will have a lot of different types of businesses, so it could be an LLP, a registered company, but also we're looking to smaller businesses who are possibly in partnerships, and also, of course, charitable bodies, social enterprises, CICs, etc. Pretty much any organisation that's not a public body can be an eligible business here. There are some non-eligible business types that are in the applicant's guidance, and we're thinking here about the sort of businesses that are, you know, betting shops, pawnbrokers, amusement arcades, tobacconists, things that public money doesn't usually support, and we're obviously going to follow that that sort of modus really. So there are some exclusions, but essentially we're looking for private investors into the town centre. And again, in the applicant's guidance, you'll see that map, and you'll also see that map with a list of streets. Now we've devised that map to try to corral the investment into the town centre. It's wider than just the High Street and 4th Street and that sort of towns and the town hall area. It is wider. We appreciate that the town centre is probably contracted, but actually there is benefit in helping investors, you know, across the whole of the town centre to bring the whole area back to life. We've tried not to create cliff edges. There may be some properties just outside the pink area that are appropriate for help, but I think the priorities will be, you know, we'll look at the priorities very closely about how you're going to deliver against those priorities. If you're outside of the pink area, it's just going to be a slightly harder task for you to show us that you are part of that town centre and you're making a transformative investment that's really going to, you know, help with our priorities around the town centre. As I say, there shouldn't be any cliff edges there. We've walked that area and included, you know, properties that we feel that actually might benefit from this scheme, and include them in order that you have the opportunity to come to us with a proposal. Next slide, please. So, you know, what can you do? Well, what we are looking for, and we try to sort of set these out into 4 sort of schemes that you might follow, and you may well have a particular premises that actually fits with more than one of these, and you may have something that you're trying to do which doesn't fit into this, although if you can fit with these, this is going to make your application a lot stronger, and there'll be less questions from us, I guess. So they're the 4 types. We're sort of looking for new businesses to the town centre. They may have come from outside of the town centre. We're happy to bring businesses in, and it may be for other parts of Trowbridge even, where we're trying to, you know, concentrate the activity into a small area, as we appreciate retailing in general has contracted in terms of, you know, town centre retailing. We're looking for businesses with a lease or a heads of terms or some kind of definite certain proposal to go into a vacant unit. We're certainly working with a landlord, but maybe have permission within a lease, and that unit is vacant and needs some help in terms of you know, refurbishment to bring it to a point where you can start to trade within that, from that unit. You may also be a business currently relocating from within the Trowbridge town centre. We know that there's some temporary retailing space, and we know that from time to time we have pop-ups and businesses are able to go into premises for short amounts of time. But you may well be in a premise which is either too big or too small, not in the right place. You want to be around the corner. You want to cluster perhaps alongside other businesses who have similar offers. We know that clustering is a key factor in town centres. Noticing that in Trowbridge actually there isn't a huge amount of clustering, and you could see that there is perhaps some market forces that would bring different businesses offering with similar offers closer together, because that's often how consumers want to find their offer. We're also going to work with landlords who have vacant commercial premises and they want to invest in a vacant unit. Now, what it doesn't say there is that you've got an end user in mind, but it will go against your application if you don't have an end user in mind. We would want to see a retailer or other service provider going into a vacant unit, but we also appreciate that you may well start a proposal off without that, and we would look to work with you to see how that, you know, you might strengthen your application by having an end user in there. But it's not completely out with the scheme that we would invest in commercial properties simply to bring them back where we can see there is, you know, a good prospect of that becoming a commercial venture. Clearly, you're going to want a tenant or some end user in the premises to have a return on investment. And then, of course, importantly, a landlord or vacant upper floors, and this is quite strictly upper. We're not looking to turn ground floor into residential, but for upper floors, and we've seen, there are some fantastic, often heritage buildings that would be well suited to residential use in and around the town centre, but may well need significant, investment. That's what the money's for, and that's what we are looking to help with. And so that's really what the eligibility of what the money would be for. So next slide, please, Caleb. So the how, and this is really about the cost. So how would we transform this? Well, how will you transform what you're doing? How will you refurbish? And what are we willing to pay for, essentially, with the grant? All those things there, those 7 or 8 items, hopefully give you a good flavour of what it is that we're prepared to support through grant. So, there's some quite hefty build projects through to buying equipment and machinery that actually then perhaps tips the balance between an empty property remaining vacant and empty, and actually having a tenant in there who's got some sort of business infrastructure, business equipment to use, and that may well be fixtures and fittings, electrical appliances, etc. But we're also keen, I think, on the bottom tick there, keen to achieve a net zero trading environment. So we would be looking for the sort of costs that you're making, particularly around buildings, to fit with energy efficiency and resource efficiency, to be looking the way that you're putting lighting in, insulation. If you're fixing a roof, you may well have the opportunity to actually make that building a lot more energy efficient, and we would expect you to be doing that. We've got public money, and we'd expect it to be working towards some of those other sort of wider aims. Again, that will make a much stronger application, but there are some exclusions, and you will need to look at the applicant's guidance, I think, to find out here. I've just put in a few there in the bold type at the bottom. Not really for running costs of your business, and not for stock, and not to pay wages, and not for the rent of the building, and not really for short life items, particularly if you think about things that might depreciate within 1 year. So that may well be some tables and chairs that go out the front of a hospitality business, but it wouldn't be the tablecloths, and it probably wouldn't be the cutlery. It's quite a hard balance to find, but we're looking to make the capital investment and not the sort of revenue stream that you might need, and you will need to think about how you start up your business if you're starting it from scratch as such. This grant will be for the capital elements, and so that's sort of how we will hopefully make the changes that we're looking for. I think it's also important to mention down there that we're not going to be able to pay for planning consent or other statutory permissions. So if you need to get certification permissions and work with environmental health around certain aspects of your business, that's not something that can be costed in to the grant. But if you're looking to build and need some significant construction, you may well want to employ a designer or an architect, and that is considered to be part of your capital expenditure, which would fit into would be an eligible cost. So there's quite a lot of work to go through there. But I think it's an important part of what you need to consider when you're first looking at the scheme. Next slide, please. So, sort of summarising now, really, this is sort of this first slide. There's 2 slides here. So the first one I'm going to show you is really around making the application, and this next slide will be about sort of delivering the project. Plan ahead. Be prepared to work with us. We're very happy to work with you. There is an email at the bottom of this particular slide, which we would always ask you to use and ask lengthy, difficult questions, as well as what might seem very, very obvious questions, because there's no wrong question to ask, really. We want to help you. We want to help you propose a sound deliverable project, and we want you to be realistic. And obviously there is, that's for you to be realistic around your finances and what you might be able to achieve, and the timetabling you might be able to achieve. And importantly, if we don't see a realistic, sound, deliverable project, it's probably not going to be awarded a grant, because we won't want to tie money up with things that aren't going to look like they're going to be delivered. Costed up, there's two parts of the application form. So there's a narrative part of the application form where you fill in text boxes and you tell us about what you're going to do, but there's also a spreadsheet which tells us how much you're going to spend and where you're going to spend it and what you're going to spend it on. So cost it up and take your time getting it right. Obtain quotes. So lots of businesses, especially particularly people who've gone into property development and work with constructors, will have specified what they need and they've looked to obtain best value. If you're looking for a smaller grant under 25,000, you won't have to find that many quotes. If you're looking for a larger grant, we're following our procurement rules, and around £25,000 above that, we do look for a much more competitive situation where you've actually gone out and tested the market and found the best value for your for what your task is and for the work, and you'll get a better quality response if you specify exactly what it is. So you may need to spend some time working out what you want, how you want it, before you go out and get the quotes. Then you'll arrive at a total cost, and we will pay up to 75% with grant, and you will have to pay at least 25% from your own reserves and from your own sources. That's a very good offer, and I think it reflects where we are in Trowbridge and how much we want to change and to revitalise the town centre. It's a very generous amount. Most grant schemes will be 50-50, but this I think reflects the sort of need for public intervention in Trowbridge town centre, and that's why it's at 75%. Now, it may not end up being 75%. There may be reasons for us not to grant you that full amount. That's our initial offer. There may be reasons which I'll talk about in a moment. At the moment, we're not restricting the number of applications that come in. So, you're more likely to get a higher offer, I think, earlier on in the scheme as we've got more funds. I think that's a sort of fact of life. So I've told you about the two parts of application. Once they're in, they will be assessed, and myself and my colleague Russell Fulwell, who's also working on the scheme, who you may well meet at some point if you put an application in, will work to assess your application, and then we will confirm the proposal with you, and actually we'll probably come back to you and say, what does this mean, what does that mean, and can you confirm this, and test you on the quality of your quotes if we're not certain that they are robust. You're going to need planning consent, perhaps, unless you're changing. You might not need consent. There may be that in there. You may be changing of use, which is a lot simpler now than it was, but you may well need planning consent, and there is quite a lengthy run-in to get planning permission. So you need to check that you need it. You may need a pre-app, and then you may need what may prove to be a fairly lengthy planning application. So plan ahead, and that may be the first thing you do. And keep in contact. We are here to help. We'll come out and see you. I'm sitting in County Hall in Trowbridge right now, so we're just across the road. We can come and talk to you before, during, and after you make your application. The key way to get in contact with us is using that fhsf@wiltshire.gov.uk email address. Next slide, please, Callum. So delivering a project, once the assessment has gone in to a council, into a council team to make the decision, there'll be a decision to award a grant. There's a small team of council officers, senior officers, who will make that decision, and we'll be basing it on the proposal and the assessment. Obviously, there is knowledge of what's going on in Trowbridge, but essentially what you write down and set out in your proposal will be what we make the decision upon. Then tell you what the decision is, and then there will be a short amount of time before we offer you the contract to sort of fine-tune what it is. Now, we know that with projects that are capital projects, you'll go out and get your quotes, you'll then spend a bit of time getting the application in, and then you'll go back out and you'll say, okay, well, I've been awarded a grant, I now need to make contact with those businesses who've offered the quotes, and the quotes may have changed. We know there's a lot of inflation around at the moment, so we will fine tune, and we may well make a provisional award of grant and then look to confirm what that grant should be once you've confirmed the quotes. and we know there's a little bit of toing and froing in that period, and that's why we set it out separately. But eventually you'll have a contract which will be for the grant, and it will control all aspects of the project, and in that contract there will be, you know, a schedule around the works, a schedule around when you'll claim the grant, a schedule of any outputs that we might have agreed with you, and it will also talk about the subsidy, and there's standard terms and conditions as well. So, you know, you'll be contracted to Wiltshire Council essentially to deliver the project that you set out in your proposal. The grant is paid in arrears, so you have to bankroll the spending. You spend, you record the spend, you make a claim. You record the spend based on what you've told us and what sits in the contract in terms of the businesses and, you know, who's going to do the work. Everything's fine. If there's we may need to look at, you may need to vary, you may need to change. We know that plans often get scrubbed. We'd ask you to keep in contact with us. We don't quite have the strict regime of the sort of EU spending anymore, but we still have, you know, public accountability and audits to think about, and we do have to keep a clear record of how the money is being spent. So, you know, that's an important part, but we obviously will talk to you about that in the pre-contract. But I think it is important for you to note that you will need to find enough money to, you know, get to a certain point before you can claim funds back in terms of the grant. So to make that easier for you, we'd offer you interim claims. So you may need to make a claim each month if necessary, if it comes down to that, because you don't have enough money to bankroll the project. But, you know, if you've got a project that, say, is taking 6 months, you may want to make 2 or 3 interim claims before a final claim to make sure that you've got enough cash flow to bankroll the project. As I said, outputs, these are fairly light touch, I think it's fair to say. But if you are creating jobs or improving broadband, they're the things that government are actually asking us to record, and we will record those. So, you know, it's great if you're going to create jobs, and we'd like to know about that, and that will be part of the claim. Subsidy is very important. It was once called state aid. We're now out of the EU and single market, so we now have a subsidy control, subsidy allowance regime in the UK. These grants are subsidy. You'll be receiving a subsidy, and it will be the minimum financial allowance that we can find. Mostly, I think the grants will be at a point where we simply are doing some notifications and telling you that you've been awarded a subsidy. There may be some situations where you've exceeded a threshold. We may have to work with you much more closely on the subsidy situation and perhaps carry out a further assessment. And that may be where we start to reduce the intervention. So we may not provide 75% of the grant. We may provide less to ensure that, you know, you fit and the project fits with the subsidy rules. We are both the council and yourselves as the project holders sort of liable to find ourselves sort of on the lawful side of subsidy and make sure that we're doing things in accordance with the legislation. So that will be something that we are talking to you about in the application form. We ask you if you've received any previous grants or support from public bodies, public sector, and that's, you know, the beginning of that process to make sure that, you know, we're okay with subsidy and we can make the grants to you. And then, of course, reporting, we will want to know about the impact. We're doing this for Trowbridge, we're doing this for Wiltshire. Government is interested. That's where the money comes from initially. And we will report back to government. I think every 6 months we need to report back, and so we'll monitor the impact. We may well come out to you for up to 3 years, and if you've got a really good project which we want to celebrate and talk about, we will, you know, we may well come to you and work together in terms of promoting your business and promoting the scheme and the successes of what we've worked on. So that shouldn't be a negative thing. It should be a positive thing about reporting, so that we, you know, as I say, celebrate the success of the scheme. So that's really where I'm going to end this part of the session. I'm now going to hand back to Councillor Richard Cluer just to go over the high level part of the scheme before we end. Sorry, I'm handing back to Rory Bowen. Actually, I'm sorry. I think I may have got that slightly wrong. Sorry, Rory.
That's all right. Thanks, Julian. That's been really, really useful. We'll come to some questions in a minute, but I just wanted to run through this last slide. Closing date for applications for the vacant commercial units scheme is Friday the 24th of November 2023, so not this year, a whole another year to run. And the actual funding of the overall Future High Streets Fund runs to March 2024, which is why this programme does have a set time frame we're working to as set by government. And worth pointing out again, at the moment we've got £1.2 million set aside. The scheme will close sooner, obviously, so there's a fixed budget envelope at the moment, and so once we reach that budget envelope, we will be closing the scheme. We are now going to go to question and answer session, and I think there's a couple in the chat which we'll come to in a minute. I think we had 2 or 3 pre-submitted questions which Russell Folwell will ask and ask others to answer.
Good evening. Thank you, Rory. My name is Russell Folwell. I'm a grant funding officer, and I'll be supporting Richard, Julian and the team, and also, most importantly, businesses and landlords around Trowbridge with the proposals coming through. So the first question that came through, we've had this identified a couple of times actually from businesses outside of the area regarding why is it only on offer, this scheme in Trowbridge currently?
I think that's one for me. I think the simple answer there is that we applied for funding through the Future High Street Fund for both Trowbridge and Salisbury. We received grants for both. They were both different schemes. The Salisbury scheme is about improving access between the train station and town centre, with a couple of add-ons. In the Trowbridge scheme, we had a higher number of vacant units, so we've put in this element of the fund as well. But it's government funding that we've been allocated. I'm afraid, as a council ourselves, whilst we do spend a large amount of your money, we spend it on a lot of statutory things, primarily social care, and then other issues around waste collection, a whole raft of things that we spend money on. It's not something we are funding ourselves. It's not something at the moment I'm in a position to fund directly from the council. We're having to make use of central government funding that we have bid for and been allocated, and it's only been allocated to be spent in Trowbridge town centre, in essence, the high street area of Trowbridge. That doesn't mean the high street, it means the town centre. So hopefully that explains it.
Thanks, Richard. Question 2, and again, this has been raised a couple of times by prospective businesses moving in from outside of the area, is how do we identify the available vacant units premises in Trowbridge? Julian, would you like to pick that one up?
I would say that the first place to look really is the map in the applicant's guidance. There is also a list of streets there, but I think, yeah, you're going to probably need to go to a commercial estate agent who knows where properties are and can help you with properties. We are trying to work with Invest in Trowbridge to make that sort of information more available. The council itself does not have a list of vacant properties. We have some good intelligence working with partners within the town centre. So we would encourage you really to find those properties and to talk to Invest in Trowbridge initially about identifying properties that might be applicable or appropriate for your business.
Fantastic, thanks, Julian. I think Kieran in the chat was actually asking a similar question as well, so hopefully that was helpful there, Kieran. Now the third question was about the amount of grant funding that is available. Is there a maximum that a business or a landlord can apply for?
Well, We've tried not to limit a maximum amount because we know that there are, some significant developments that are required in the area. Essentially, we have a £100,000 sort of upper limit where we are, and that's an expectation where we think that most applicants and projects would fit within that, fit that envelope. We've got essentially two levels, up to £25,000, where the quotes are, the procurement sort of side of things are a lot more simpler. We should be able to assess those quicker, and that's why they're essentially small grants. And then sort of 25,000 up to 100,000, we're looking to for heftier projects. Now, the real limitation is around subsidy, as I said a little bit a while ago. In terms of subsidy allowance, we're looking for the minimum financial allowance, which currently is, I think, about 315,000. And if you're within that range, it's quite simply a process of us notifying us and us notifying you about the subsidy. If you go over that and make a proposal for more than £315,000 grant, we would need to do a further assessment. But I think it's fair to say the more grant that you ask for, the more transformative the project would need to be, the closer to the priorities you would need to be, the realism of the project and the plan and the proposal would need to be stronger, because you'd be using up more of the available funds. But that's not to say we wouldn't look at a larger application. I think what it's fair to say as well about subsidy is that if you've already got a number of if you've already had a number of grants and support through public support in the last 3 years, that will go against the amount of money that you can be granted to fit within those thresholds. So that's a bit of a constraint, but it's a constraint that comes from our UK obligations to trade, essentially, and every country has it. We used to have state aid, we now have subsidy. I think the rules are a little bit looser. The thresholds are a little bit higher than they were with state aid, but we will still need to do that assessment. But essentially, that's how you'll be limited in terms of funding. So it'll be a case of, have you got a strong application that justifies a very large grant, and can it be lawfully made given the subsidy allowance rules?
Thanks, Julian. Was that the last of the pre-submitted, Russell? I think.
Yes, that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Julian. That's really useful answers. Just go through the ones. We've got 3 or 4 in the chat here, and I think we might have already covered a couple of them, but there's one here. If a planning application is required, can the funding be allocated and flexible around any changes required by the consent? I think Julian's probably set out our position, although not answering this specifically, that we will work, we will be here to talk through applications from the beginning beyond the end. So, we want to work in partnership with you on this, and we realise through our own experience delivering projects how things can move and shape sometimes unexpectedly as you develop a project. So I think the provisional award or a conditional award is probably what we would look at. Do you want to add anything, Julian, to that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think if planning consent is not in place when your application lands and we look at it, it will certainly go against your application, and the assessment will pick that up, and the assessment will almost certainly, if everything else looks good and eligible, recommend to the panel that a conditional award is made, and the condition will be to obtain planning consent. As Rory said, we know that we need to work with you because there may be some timings that we need to be aware of in terms of meeting those conditions.
Great, thanks. Next one is Kieran. Our proposed business is a brew pub with live world music. Would this grant support brewing equipment? I think it's fairly straightforward, unless Julian starts shaking his head that it's capital. That's no, you're shaking your head.
Well, this will present us with a bit of a problem. I think that's fair enough to say. To my mind, no, it wouldn't provide the brewing equipment. It could provide everything up to, so all the plumbing and electricals that you may need in terms of the fixtures and well, fixed fittings within the property. But if you're bringing in significantly costly equipment that's very specific to your business and isn't specific to, you know, refurbished property, then I think that's really a business cost. But it's a question of debate, and that's sort of something that we'd probably want to talk to you about in a bit more detail. So Kieran, it might be worth using the email address that we've given, and you know, we will come to talk to you quite literally about what it is and the costs, and to look at whether we can you know, consider that as part of the award. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair enough thing. I'm just going to sit on the fence a little bit with that because well, because it will present us with a bit of a time to scratch our heads. We're right at the very beginning of this scheme, so we did expect to have some challenges, and I think that would be one.
I would add, I am intrigued to know what the beer tastes like.
Good stuff. Yeah, and I think that's a kind of a more general point, not about the beer, but about the design of the scheme. You know, all best efforts and a lot of hard work has gone into that, but we realise, you know, the realities of ideas and innovation and the community wanting to deliver is will raise some questions we probably haven't covered. So, you know, we have got those channels for that. Start those conversations early would be good. Another question from Kieran was around the list of vacant units, which I think we've covered off. There's an active Chamber of Commerce in Trowbridge. The Invest in Trowbridge group are good places to go, as well as the commercial agents, as Julian's previously mentioned. Got one more on the chat at the moment. Furlough is something I imagine would count towards your company's subsidy. I think that's something if you email in with a slightly...
No, furlough does not count towards subsidy. That's a rule. We've seen that, and that's very clear now. The government's been very clear on furlough. It's not a subsidy. It would not count towards counting up towards that threshold.
Okay, good. Definitive answer from Julian. Well done. Don't
one of the few areas of definition we have.
Okay, great. Let's see. Yes, okay. Well, any more questions? We'll give it another few seconds, see if anything else comes in. Otherwise, I think that's it for the Q&A. So thanks to everyone who's asked a question. I think Councillor Kluwer has a few closing comments.
Thank you. Just very briefly to thank everyone for coming along and listening, to urge anyone with a great idea to apply. Let's use this to try and transform Trowbridge, and to thank officers for the very detailed information that's been provided today. I know this can seem a little daunting, going through the hurdles, applying for things, but we will make this as simple as we can within the rules that we've got from government. Just touching on the subsidy issue, that also sounds scary. I run my own, well, I used to run my own small business. My wife does now. She's just walked into the room and is laughing at me. The state subsidy rules, the only time I've ever seen that come up is on some of the tax returns you have to put in about whether you get state subsidies. So it's probably going to be a headache for your accountant rather than anything else, from what I can see. I might be oversimplifying that, but if you're a small company, I wouldn't get too worried about some of those sort of large concerning words that have come across. This is a great opportunity to take an idea, help get it on the high street into an empty unit, and help make the future of Trowbridge something new and exciting, and I don't know, a little bit grittier, if that's the way I can put it. That seems to be what I'm hearing from people in Trowbridge that they want. They want something a little more real, a little more modern. You may have completely different ideas, so over to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thanks once again for everyone joining us. I won't attempt to read out the website address, but use a search engine, and if you Google Wiltshire Trowbridge Commercial Vacant Units Fund, you will be directed to the further information in the application form. So thanks again for joining us, and have a good evening.